Welcome to Stormwatch, coming to you from the 2024 Governor's Hurricane Conference at the Palm Beach County Convention Center. Let's take a look at some of the people we had an opportunity to talk with. We're now joined by Paul Womble, Polk County Emergency Management Director and the President of the Governor's Hurricane Conference. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Mary.
So we're here at the Governor's Hurricane Conference. Tell us a little bit about what the Governor's Hurricane Conference is.
It's a week for emergency management professionals really from all over the country, plus international representatives from some of the Caribbean islands, anyone that has a hurricane threat, to train together, learn together, make sure we're up to date on the latest policies and procedures and regulations, but more importantly, really get to know each other and opportunity to build on lessons learned and to look into the future on how we move the needle forward on preparedness and response, recovery, and mitigation in Florida.
So who puts this conference on? How was it formed?
So there's 4 sponsoring organizations: Florida Emergency Preparedness Association, National Weather Service, American Red Cross, and the Florida Division of Emergency Management, with a host of paid staff and volunteer staff. The conference is a 501c3, so a nonprofit, and this is our 38th year. So almost 4 decades that the conference has been around and making a difference in Florida that whole time.
So with all of this experience in the room and recent storms, what types of things does the trainings focus on? Well,
it's just that, lessons learned. We've seen a lot of new people in our profession as more experienced folks retire or go on to other places. So we have to make sure that, we're training the next generation of emergency managers. We hear updates every year from the National Hurricane Center director with an outlook of the upcoming hurricane season. So it's really about making sure we're current as best we can be, training on basic fundamental type classes all the way up to advanced meteorology classes.
So what types of things do you and your staff look forward to when coming to the hurricane conference?
Well, we get to see, friends. We've been doing this for, as you know, a very long time. So those relationships are the most important thing in our business. Who could I know somewhere in the state or beyond? I might need help with a plan or help with a training or have questions about policies and procedures. And we get to know people here this week.
So there was also an exhibit hall. So share with us a little bit about that. Like, did you see any new things in the exhibit hall, or what kind of things were displayed there?
Yeah, we have to stay up on technology and vendors that help, especially when we have large disasters, large storms. Government can't do it all. So what are the resources that are available? Technology is changing so rapidly in our world. Drones for damage assessment, and vendors that have portable shower houses and bunk houses and, those kind of things. So when infrastructure is destroyed, if you have no power, if you're in a rural area and you have a well and you're on a septic tank, you can't flush, you can't do the basics, right? So we might need to bring in these trailers and set up these service centers where people can come and do their laundry and do those kind of things post-storm until recovery can really get going.
So is there anything that you took out of the conference this year or have seen this year that you thought was something new and creative and inventive?
Well, I think, this is the 20th anniversary of the 2004 hurricane season, which was record-setting. 4 hurricanes hit Florida that year, plus a tropical storm threat. We've come a long way since then. Our emergency operations centers have been, we've seen lots of investments from the state and local governments to build EOCs to make sure we have the facilities that we need, because if we have a hurricane, we'll be at work in a facility that, has got to survive the storm. But I think it's really the changes in our world of technology and staying current and make sure we still know the people. We know the folks at our local National Weather Service office. We can call them at any time, but certainly during a storm, and get their input, get their guidance. And if you don't know someone, if you haven't met them, you may not be able to do that, especially if it's 2 a.m. and a dark and stormy night. You've got to know the people that you're working with and who can help you. And that's the biggest benefit of the conference.
So let's talk about those relationships and how coming to a conference like this has helped you professionally. Have there been experiences where you've either had people come in to help you or you've gone to help others?
Both. We were hit 3 times. We're the only county in the state that have had the eye wall of a hurricane come through in a single season in '04. Charlie Francis Jean. And Polk County learned then the importance of people coming to help us. So we've returned that help through various deployments to other parts of the state. Even to a team of us went to New York after Hurricane Sandy and to Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. So again, you make those relationships here. You don't want somebody that you don't know to come into your EOC to help. It makes it better if you know them. So it's all about relationships.
So what would be the benefit, or what do you think some of the takeaways are for your residents that you learned here today? Or what are you going to take from this conference and take home and educate your community?
Well, we're an inland county. We don't have storm surge threat, but we have all the other hazards that come with a hurricane. So strong winds. Well, what does that mean? Strong winds can damage homes and businesses directly, or it can blow down trees, which will damage homes and businesses, or knock down power lines and block roads. We had significant flooding in our past, where neighborhoods were isolated or water in homes for weeks. So we have to be prepared for that, but we need to make sure our residents understand the hazards. And that's been a change. There's a new Hurricane Center product that'll be out later in the summer in August that not only shows the cone of uncertainty, which is where the center of the storm can go, but also the inland wind threat, more focus on the flooding, the tornadoes, not just saying, hey, there's a hurricane coming. It's really more about what does that mean and what could happen in our community.
So being an emergency manager, I just asked you for another county in the state of Florida, what would you want to say to our Palm Beach County residents as an emergency manager in the state of Florida? What would you tell them that they need to know for this hurricane season?
Yeah, you got to have a plan, have a way to get information. And when you get information, be able to act on it. For evacuations and storm surge that you guys have to worry about. But even if you're not in an evacuation zone, electricity is king, right? If you don't have power at your house, if that's the only impact from a storm, what can't you do right now if the power goes out in your house? How are you going to cook? How are you going to drink? How are you going to bathe? How are you going to charge your cell phone? Because eventually those will die. So have multiple ways to get information. And just know what you're going to do. Think about it with your family. Know what your work expectations are. I'll be at work if we have a hurricane. So I have to, translate that to what that means for my family. And that changes year to year. Family, my mom, aging, has some health issues. So my wife works for local government, and she will have to come in to do work as well. So, you just have to figure out, what does that mean? What does a storm mean for you and your family?
Oh, great last points for our viewers. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us on Stormwatch.
Sure thing. Happy to be here.
And thank you for watching Stormwatch. We'll be right back.
So we represent a company that provides meal kits for the military. They're shelf stable, they last a year, and we have different varieties from breakfast, lunch, dinner. We also provide meal kits for that have 4 meals for disaster relief, for hurricane or any disaster, all ready to go with utensils. So a lot of these are high calorie and have a lot of protein. They're shelf-stable pouches, like tuna, for instance. We have tuna salad, chicken salad, beef, barbecue chicken, and then a lot of snacks, and it provides a drink as well. This replenishes everything you need for dehydration, the sodium and the sugars that our body needs. During COVID, we had to provide for people that were homeless and had lost their jobs and places to live, and they didn't have employment, so they needed food for the food banks as well. For instance, in Puerto Rico, when Maria hit, we provided millions for that country.
What we manufacture are speed calming signs, which can also be used then for emergency purposes and taken over by DOT through the NTCIP protocol, where you can change messaging to anything pertinent for the moment. In addition to the signs, we have a variable message trailer which then again also does traffic studies, speed calming, but can be reverted for specific messages by the community, parking issues during events, you name it, as well as evacuation routes during hurricane season. The variable message trailer can be set up in a couple of minutes. Just trailer to location, choose one of the standard messages that are already pre-programmed, hit run, and you're up and running. So it's a couple of minutes. You would have to raise the mast to the minimum 7 feet that DOT requires, but that, again, within a couple of minutes, you're set up and running.
We manufacture atmospheric water generators that make pure drinking water from the humidity in the air. So in a disaster situation, one of the biggest things is the need for water. So we see all of Red Cross and all of these disaster relief organizations shipping in bottled water. Well, now we have technology that will take the humidity from the air and make pure drinking water. So anytime water goes from a gas form to a liquid form, it's pure. Think about how we distill water. We boil it, we put it to steam, we capture the steam and bring it back down to a liquid. That's how we distill water and make water pure. We're tapping into the the water cycle that we learned about in 7th grade. Evaporation, condensation. Press this button. There are 2 filters here. One is a carbon filter, another's a mineral filter. You turn it. There's no leakage whatsoever. Once you break the seal, the water stops going through. You change the filters, and you have easy maintenance.
Welcome back to Stormwatch. Recently, we had a visit with Executive Director of the Florida Division of Emergency Management, Kevin Guthrie. Here's some of the points he had to share.
One thing that we are all in agreement on is we want our constituents to be prepared. We want to make sure that you go to your local emergency management website, whatever that may be, whether it's Palm Beach, St. Lucie, Martin, or Indian River County, and build a preparedness kit. If you are one of the 60 to 70% of individuals in the United States that live paycheck to paycheck, then start making choices where you may go out this weekend, next weekend, and change from fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, fresh meats to maybe canned fruits, canned vegetables, and canned meats, so that if you have to evacuate, you go with that same grocery bag, go right back to your pantry and bring those items off the shelf, and now you have your preparedness kit for food and water right then and there. Make sure you have all your important documents. Make sure you have your insurance papers, your social security card, birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates in some cases. Make sure you have all of those documents today. That's something you can do today. It doesn't cost you any money, but you can go and get those things today and put those together into your kit so that they're ready to go. You know the place that they're at. You don't have to fumble around and try to get all that stuff in the last minute. We talk about insurance. Insurance market is tough across the United States right now. One of the things that we ask people to do, probably about half the people in the state of Florida do not have any type of insurance. If you don't have insurance because you can't afford insurance, look at alternatives. One of the things that I would ask you to do is maybe look at a contents policy, or if you're a renter, look at a renter's policy. You can get $35,000, $40,000 of coverage inside the state of Florida on a renter's policy or a contents policy for probably less than $300 a year. That is a good bridge to help you at least replace the contents of your home should your contents be destroyed. So please make sure you're looking at those alternative situations to insurance if you cannot afford full-blown coverage. If you can afford the full coverage and you have full coverage, now is a good time to do a look at your insurance policies and make sure that you have enough on your insurance to actually cover the cost of replacing your home should you experience a catastrophic event. The last thing that I would want to tell individuals as a group is make sure that when the time comes to evacuate, I'm not going to issue that. That's going to come from one of the men or women behind me. Make sure you're tuned into your local emergency manager and you listen for those evacuation orders. Those are going to come from the men and women behind me, not from me. If they ask you to evacuate, please evacuate. If they ask you to stay in place or not call your evacuation zone, don't evacuate. We, at Hurricane Irma, we evacuated South Florida by about 2 million people that did not need to evacuate. They were not in an evacuation zone. They were in current building code construction, which in some cases in Florida can withstand 125-mile-an-hour winds. We did not need to evacuate certain individuals. If you're electric dependent, 100% evacuate. But if you're not, your best situation, and that's what we call know your home, know your zone. As we go ready to go into hurricane season, keep your gas tanks and your electric vehicles halfway full. When it gets to halfway full, that's the new empty. Go ahead and fill it up from there so that if we ask you to evacuate, you're ready to do it, and you only have to go tens of miles. You don't have to go hundreds of miles. So evacuate to that next closest facility that can take you, whether in your case that's friends and family first, hotels, or if you have to go to a public shelter, you go to a public shelter. But you do not need to evacuate from South Florida, South Central Florida, all the way clear up to Georgia. Those days are over. All you need to do is evacuate tens of miles.
And what do you tell the people who are complacent?
So this is a conversation that we all have been having for the last 2 years, really since Hurricane Ian hit. And that is, take away all the behavioral experts, take away all the psychology of who's going to do what. What we hear over and over more and more is this storm wasn't like X storm. So what I heard inside of Hurricane Ian was, this wasn't Irma, this wasn't Charlie. If people are going to naturally have a tendency to compare this year's storm to something in the past, so maybe a Dorian for this area. Dorian, we got lucky. Dorian stayed 85 miles off the shore. Well, let's have the conversation about what if Dorian would have actually made landfall. We'd probably be still picking up debris today had that 165 mile an hour Cat 5 hurricane made landfall in the Treasure Coast Palm Beach area. So what we're talking about now is we need to tell people the why. So if they're going to compare storms, then let's have the conversation amongst ourselves and tell them how Hurricane Ian is different from Hurricane Irma. Irma came up through Cujo Key, made landfall on Marco Island. The right front side of that storm went through the Everglades, which is a nature-based solution to lay storm surge down. Whereas Hurricane Ian came straight off the Gulf. There was nothing nature-based in its way. All 18 foot of that storm surge made landfall in Fort Myers Beach. We got to make sure we tell people the why.
I would just really echo the information that Kevin shared. We really need our residents. We have so many new residents that have moved into the state of Florida, and our county in particular, that maybe don't know if they're in a hurricane evacuation zone. And it's so important for our newer residents to know that a hurricane evacuation zone is very different than your flood zone. So when we tell individuals to understand if they live in a zone, that would mean hurricane evacuation zone as well as your flood zone. The two are very different. You could be impacted by inland flooding if you're in a flood zone, but also by storm surge flooding if you're in a hurricane evacuation zone. So we encourage our residents, when we talk about know your zone, know the difference in your zones that may impact your home, and understand what measures you need to take to protect yourself should you get inland flooding, as well as be asked to evacuate for an approaching hurricane.
We are preparing for a supercharged season, as all the scientists have told us it's going to be. But here's what I want people to take away. The viewers in this area, I don't want you to worry about whether there's going to be one storm or 5 storms. We'll worry about the number of storms on our side. We'll make sure that we're ready. But what we need our viewers to do more than anything else in the Palm Beach region, the Treasure Coast portion of the state, is if it comes to you, I need you to be ready. The toughest decision that we make, that we pull over, is the decision to evacuate. No county director spends more time making a decision to order an evacuation. That is the number one thing that they worry about all the time. What level of evacuation, where do I need to be at? So when they ask you to evacuate, please know that they have poured hours into that decision. But when they ask you to evacuate, you need to evacuate. So we need you to be ready to evacuate if we call for evacuation in your particular area. Be registered as a functional or special needs patient today so that these counties can help you. Also on their website is to sign up for alerts. And you can sign up for alerts from your emergency management agency today. You do that by going to their website. So please make sure that you're doing those type of things today. Those are free. Those are today action. You don't have to wait to hurricane season. And I would highly recommend you sign up as a special needs patient and get the alerts. Now, let me dive one level deeper on that. My father doesn't think he's a special needs registrant. My mother-in-law and father-in-law in Winter Haven don't think they are, but they are dependent on electric. My mother-in-law is legally blind. My father has a terminal respiratory disease. We need to make sure that we know where you're at and how to help you. So even though you function on a day-to-day basis, if you need that electricity, If you need extra help, go and sign up and let us know where you're at today so that we can come and help you when that disaster happens.
Hi, this is Dan Brown from the National Hurricane Center. I want you to stay safe this hurricane season. One of the first things that you can do is find out if you live in an evacuation zone. And if you do, figure out a place that you're going to help ride out that storm. I also want you to make sure you have your tips to be safe this hurricane season. So visit your local emergency management agency and also the National Hurricane Center at hurricanes.gov.
Welcome back to Stormwatch. We're now joined by Dr. Phil Klotzbach, Senior Research Scientist with Colorado State University. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Mary.
We love having you on the show, Dr. Klotzbach. So let's talk about, everybody looks out for Colorado State University's predictions for the season. So let's talk about what you're looking at this year.
Yeah, well, we're forecasting a very busy Atlantic hurricane season in 2024. A total of 23 named storms. Those are systems named by the National Hurricane Center. Tropical storms and hurricanes, so winds of 39 miles per hour or greater. Of those 23, 11 becoming hurricanes, and of those 11, 5 becoming major Category 3, 4, 5 hurricanes, winds of 111 miles per hour or greater. That compares with the long-term average of about 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes, so a well above average season.
So let's talk about what you look at to make these determinations and what you're seeing this year to make it such a large prediction.
Yeah. So we basically, the way that we do our seasonal hurricane forecast is we use a lot of historical data. So we basically look for precursor signals. So basically, what sets of climate conditions preceded active seasons, and alternatively, which set preceded inactive seasons. This was research pioneered by my mentor, Dr. Bill Gray, who started these forecasts all the way back in 1984. For this year, we have an extremely warm Atlantic right now. The Atlantic is near record or record warm, depending on exactly where you look. A warm Atlantic provides more fuel for storms. It also tends to be associated with lower pressures and a more unstable atmosphere, both of which are more conducive for hurricane formation and intensification. In the tropical Pacific Ocean, we had El Nino last year. This year, we're transitioning over very likely towards La Nina. La Nina is colder water in the eastern and central tropical Pacific Ocean. And why that matters in the Atlantic Ocean is because it changes where the thunderstorms form in the Pacific Ocean in such a way that you tend to get upper level winds high up in the atmosphere blowing out of the west in an El Nino, and that tends to increase shear. So this year we're expecting La Nina. We expect decreased shear, less shear, tearing apart of the hurricanes means the hurricanes can develop, they can get taller in the atmosphere and become stronger, and then also increases their odds of significant intensification.
So, you know, when the hurricane predictions come out, right, local communities say, well, it doesn't matter, it could just be one. But tell us about this season, like this big number. I mean, a lot of attention has gone into the high increase number of storms that are predicted. Have we seen this level of storm predictions in the past?
So for our seasonal forecast, this is the most that we forecast in April, 11 hurricanes. Now we've had up to 15 hurricanes in the season. We had that in 2005. We had 14 hurricanes in 2020, but from our forecast perspective, this is the most that we forecast. It's a very aggressive forecast for early April. We had higher than normal confidence in early April, and still today we still have pretty high confidence in that forecast. Not a lot has changed. In terms of what the general public should be doing with it, we certainly do emphasize that it only takes that one hurricane to make it an active season for you. But in general, more active seasons do also have more landfalling hurricanes. So it's not to say that someone will hit. Odds of any one spot along the coast being hit in any year are low, but this year the odds are simply elevated just because the season does look quite active.
So let's talk about, and you mentioned Dr. Gray. We interviewed Dr. Gray on Stormwatch several times. It was wonderful to interview him. And you worked alongside him for several years. So tell me about, here at the Governor's Hurricane Conference, we learned a lot about what has happened in the world of forecasting since the 2004 season when we had multiple storms. How has your prediction gotten either different or more precise. Can you share with us how you've progressed?
Yeah. So we've done a lot of work, especially honestly in about the last 10 years. First of all, we now have better historical analyses of the past. And when we have better data for the past, it helps us better predict the future. We also now have climate models that can forecast 1 to 3 months in advance or even 6 months in advance with reasonable levels of skill. And so we're not saying, give me a forecast for September 3rd. What we're saying is, give me a forecast for say like a month-long average. And it can do that for say like wind patterns in the tropics or sea surface temperature patterns. So that helps us really kind of better understand what's going on. In addition to using the past to predict the future, we can also look at predictions of the future and then say, okay, if the water temperatures are warm, the shear is low, the Atlantic should have above normal activity. And it's really helped, I'd say, with last year's forecast. So last year was kind of this big clash of the titans. We had an extremely warm Atlantic, but also a strong El Nino, which normally increases your shear. The models were forecasting the strong El Nino and the warm Atlantic, but they said, hey, the shear in the Atlantic should be relatively low. We said, okay, the models seem to know what they're doing, so we went with that forecast of low shear, and we forecast an above normal season, and it ended up being an above normal season. Fortunately, last year, most of the storms basically recurved fairly far east and stayed out to sea. The most significant storm of last year was Idalia, which was obviously a significant major hurricane in the Big Bend of Florida.
You mentioned about looking at the past, and Dr. Gray, I just remember him talking about how weather patterns are cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeing that in your research? I mean, knowing that, can you go back to a point in time where you're like, this season looks like a particular season?
Yeah, so we do have what are called analog years. So the years in the past that had conditions similar to what we currently see, and especially what we expect to see for the season. So we did select analog years for the 2024 season. So these are years that look kind of similar to what we expect. So a really warm Atlantic, transitioning from El Nino to La Nina. And so the primary years that we selected are 1878, which is going way, way back in the history books, but that year was certainly transitioning from El Nino to La Nina. The Atlantic was also likely very warm that year. It wasn't quite a busy hurricane season as well. 1926 is another analog year. It was a very busy hurricane season. Then 1998, 2010, and 2020. And so 2010 and 2020 are good examples of how, when you look at two analogs, they're both very busy seasons. 2020 was an extremely highly impactful year, especially along the Gulf of Mexico, especially Louisiana. We had 30 storms in 2020, a lot of high impact storms hitting the US. 2010 was also a very busy season. We had 12 hurricanes in the Atlantic, not one hit the US. We had a really good streak of luck in 2010. That year, most of the storms from right off of Africa and recurved and went out to sea. So it just kind of highlights that even with busy hurricane seasons, you can have storms tracking basically in different directions.
It's amazing, and your work is so valuable to individuals that are looking to see what we could be expecting. We appreciate your time, Dr. Klotzbach, that you spend with us on Stormwatch, and thank you for being with us again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching Stormwatch, coming to you from the Governor's Hurricane Conference at the Palm Beach County Convention Center. For more information, go to readypbc.gov. I'm Mary Blakeney.